Well, first of all, it is an honour to be invited to come here. I did actually think about it, that, you know, when I was first diagnosed about 23 years ago, the thing I thought, that sort of like, well, you'll never have to worry about getting old, you'll never have to worry about getting fat. And I have to worry about both of those now. So actually, it is a celebration, as you say, that actually the things that we used to think were what we had to worry about have changed. And it's now looking at the thing of what are the challenges for people who are positive that are getting old. And as Fiona said, it's not something that you can say, well, look at the people before you. There are no people really. Although I have to say, sorry. Oh, one's disappeared. So I can't actually show you the 100-year-old man, because there's the Lisbon patient who's over 100 years old living with HIV. So there are people out there that are actually doing this living research of what it's like to be older and HIV positive. And when I told my friends, I said, do you know, HIV Scotland has asked me to talk about social isolation. I don't think I'm socially isolated. I think I'm one of the least socially isolated people that I know. So but obviously, actually, one of the truths is that nobody is never socially isolated. Everybody sometimes really does feel, I'm not comfortable here. Lots of people who will think, do you know, I just really don't feel like I don't have any real friends. Everybody has times when getting up in the morning is just really, really impossible or very difficult. So I think that it isn't something which, I think there's a spectrum, and I think that Fiona's really described a lot. And I'm not going to say that I've never felt it, but I think somebody who I hope can say some of the things which will make people feel that it isn't wrong to be feeling socially isolated, but it is actually something that we have a bit of control over ourselves. So anyway, I was just going to show this picture, thankfully, did come out. And actually, these are some of the images that I was looking at when I was looking for social isolation and older people. And actually, it does, you know, the image of an older person is pretty depressing. It's not surprising that you feel like these sorts of people, even the people doing the old exercise class, they're not exactly having a real laugh about it, you know. It's all a bit negative, and what are the challenges for older people? What are the problems with older people? And actually, that's why I put a photograph of me. You might see me there in the middle of it. That's me standing on the staircase where I have, and this, I think, is the image of older people that I would like to sort of celebrate. Because this was in July this year that some of my friends that I'd met at university, we actually got together. Some of us knew, we'd been quite close in touch, but we decided that we would have a reunion. And so we arranged a date and a hotel, and we sort of passed it on to anybody who might. And there was 15 of us from university who came to this, as you can see, quite a nice hotel. And and we all had a few days of very nice catching up. Some of them I hadn't seen since I left Southampton University in 1973. So it was, some of them I absolutely would not have, I would have walked past in the street. I would never, and I probably would, because I'm really bad at recognizing people, so I probably would again, but they were, now what I was thinking was, there's me proving that actually being socially isolated is not it's not a guarantee. You don't have to be socially isolated, but what I would say is that there's three sorts of things that actually helped make this picture possible. Number one, I went to university. I had a good education. I had a chance for those relationships to be formed at a sort of period of my life where you were able to make friendships. Now, I think that there's a range. There's no typical HIV positive person. I'm not typical, neither is anybody else really a typical person. So I'm apologizing for saying, well, I had an education, lots of people didn't get to higher education. I had higher education when it didn't cost you the rest of your life to pay for it. So the first thing was that I got a good education, and that gave me the chance to earn enough money so that my retirement I could afford a couple of nights. Now, a couple of those people stayed in a campsite nearby because they couldn't afford the hotel. But I suspect there was another couple of people who said, oh, that's a bit expensive, and didn't join us because they didn't have the money to do that. So I think that having access to enough funds to be able to keep in touch and to feel confident about meeting other people and saying, well, I've done nothing with my last 40 years, So people, it's actually a sort of, it's a cycle downwards. So people who didn't feel that they could join us were the people that we should be thinking about today, not me there with a bunch of people that I, know very well in some cases, not so well in others. And the other thing was, I was healthy enough to go there, that actually what was happening, the people who weren't there were the people who weren't. Actually, one of the reasons we did it is because one of those people there has got terminal cancer, and we wanted to meet before she wasn't able to join us. So that was it was a prompting for the get-together. But I think it actually was the idea that we could do it, and actually grabbing it while we could was an important part of why we weren't socially isolated. But so that's, I have this idea about how to be happy, comfortable, jog along. There's a sort of three-legged stool idea, and it's something that I used to think about when I was young. You've got your work, you've got your relationships, and you've got your health. And that's the three legs that you sit on to make your life okay. Now, for some of us, work is, most people by the time they're 68 are no longer working. So work doesn't have the same function of providing you with the routines and stuff. So work, when you're retired, is a slightly different thing. And I think instead of calling it work, I sort of talk about purpose, that it's turned into, what's my purpose here? Can I not just make sure that I have some sort of purpose. And I can certainly second what Fiona was saying about mixing with even older people than me, because I go and with ArtLink Access, which is an Edinburgh project, I visit an older person once a fortnight. She's 101, and we do a sort of video or an arts-related thing with the through that. And you know, I just love her. She's amazing. She's 101. She doesn't get any support, no carers coming in. She just is. She's very lucky to be 101. She can't hear that well. She can't see that well. But she can absolutely function on her own independently. And she's just fantastic. So that's part of my purpose. And she is, I said, you're my inspiration. So actually, I don't want to be 101. Neither does she, actually. But I do think that, you know, that's the purpose that I feel is one of the legs. And it's a harder thing to do when you don't have, oh, I've got to work, I've got to get the money in. Well, most of us, it's not going to be about getting the money in, because either you've got it in already, or it's not going to, you're not going to get paid much. So it is about work turning into purpose. The second leg is the health aspect. And as I say, I mean, that's both physical and mental health. And I do think that, yes, it is great to be in a position that I am, where I take my tablets in the morning and get on with the rest of my... I am so lucky that they always talk about 1996 being the year when there was the pivot, that people were able to... There was medication available, and that was the very year that I got infected and diagnosed as well. So actually, I mean, I am probably one of the oldest people who have had HIV from a time when there was not really invasive, damaging treatments. So my health hasn't ever really, well, for 2 or 3 years, I had a pretty bad time of it. And I really wasn't in particularly good health, partly because I thought, I'm going to do one last thing before I have to sort of give up and lie in a bed. And I went to Cambodia, and I went without any treatment. And I just got more ill than I should have done. And if I'd been getting checked as I would have been in this country, I would not have gone down as far as I did before I started my treatment. So I did have that period in my life where I really do understand how difficult life is and how unlikely. I mean, actually, 1 or 2 of these friends were there during that time, but they weren't anywhere near me. I mean, I came to Edinburgh in 2000, because I have a sister here, and that was the first time I'd lived in Scotland at all. And my experience was that I didn't have any friends, I didn't have any work to go out with, I really wasn't in good health, and I really did struggle mentally and physically for a couple of years. And it really took me to go right down, admitted to the Edinburgh Royal, and realized, because actually I had to deal with the fact that I wasn't going to die. I had thought I was just going to be dead, and that was what I was planning the last period of my life. And then it didn't happen. So I had to really think again about what was my life for. And it took time. And I was very, very lucky, because there were support services in Scotland, and because of all the other advantages I'd had earlier in life, I learned how to access them and ask for the sort of help and join Waverley Care Women's Group, or go to the psychiatrist and get the support over a 2 or 3 month period that changed things around for me. So, as I say, I don't expect my story to be one of like everything was all brilliant or everything was all miserable. And, you know, I think that might be the case for a lot of people. But I do think that it is easier for someone like me than it is for a lot of the other people that I know. But I do believe that, you know, work isn't easy, health isn't easy, and social relationships, which is the other big leg. And social relationships, you do, I mean, one of the biggest problems for people as they get older is the bereavement aspect, that you think you've got friends and then they die. You know, I mean, it's just the hardest thing. And when you've had friends like these for 50 years, you sort of think, well, it's taken all that time to get to know people. I can't start at the age of 70 getting new friends because I haven't got the time. Because a lot of friendship is about shared experience over the years. You can't have an immediate old friend. Old friends, by definition, you've known for a while, and making and replacing old friends isn't the easiest thing in the world. So, as I say, luckily, 20 years down the line in Edinburgh, I have now what I would call old friends, and that has helped a lot for me. But it's helped because I really think I recognize how important it is for me. So those are that's sort of my personal experience that I've shared with you. And now I'll just finish. I think I'm over time, aren't I? This is one of the questions that I am asking when people say to me, well, why is aging any different for people with HIV? You know, why are we bringing HIV into the equation? And I hope that I have explained quite a lot of the issues. I mean, just as a very clear one example, one of my friends was diagnosed with dementia. She was having a pretty difficult time, and she stopped taking her meds, and she got in a muddle, and her daughter had to come and deal with what was going on. That was when her daughter discovered that her mother was positive. And it was really quite a difficult conversation for her to have at that stage in her life. So I think that that's one very clear difference between aging and getting dementia and aging with HIV and getting dementia. But I do think the chances of you having had a good, clear working life might be different. So the old friends might be a different possibility. You may have moved because of things to do with your family or home or whatever. So there are quite often issues that do make it different. So I think that the first question that I've asked there, aging and socialization, inevitable? Well, I think that what we're trying to say is that it's not inevitable. It's possible for everyone. It's more possible for some, but it doesn't have to be inevitable for everyone. And what we've said is aging with HIV, is there going to be some drug-related issues which have yet to be identified? If we've had these drugs for 25 years, nobody knows what the long-term implications of these are. So actually, could there be an aging condition which has yet to be identified. So it isn't, there's a lot of unknowns about this whole thing, which I think adds to, I'm not anxious about it because I just don't have anxiety in my particular, that's not one of my big problems. But if you're an anxious person, that could be a very significant part of what people feel about their situation, that these drugs have really damaged me in some way. Never mind the HIV maybe having damaged you. I mean, those of us who've lived long enough with HIV know that there was huge amounts of dementia and other sort of mental deterioration linked to HIV in the early days. And then is it important? Because actually I know a lot of people who will say, it's my diabetes, not my HIV that's the problem. It's my whatever, heart condition. And I can really understand that, but they do still have to have HIV as part of it. So it does add an extra dimension to it. It might not be the most significant, but it's a sort of underlying issue all the time. And the last thing, can we, as positive people, do anything to affect our social isolation or not? And I think it's not unreasonable for us to think that we should feel that we are powerful enough to do something about it. We may not always succeed, we may not feel, but I think we should take some sort of control and not allow that sense of, well, I'm old, what can I expect? I think we can, if we feel that we have the power to affect our own lives, that would be good. So I'm hoping that that's been an interesting perspective, but it's only my views. Okay, thank you.